Nearly half of Peru is just now under a state of emergency, and the government that signed the decree did not exist 1 week ago. At least 68 people have been killed by floods, landslides, and mudslides driven by El Niño Costero. 931 kilometers of roads have been destroyed. A military helicopter carrying families to safety crashed into a mountain near Chala, killing all 15 on board, including 7 children. The youngest was just 3 years old. In Arequipa, Peru's second-largest city, mudflows shut down the main water treatment plant and cut water to more than 30,000 households. A police officer in Lima drowned in the Rimac River while trying to rescue a dog trapped on a tire. The country's Chamber of Commerce now estimates the disaster is bleeding $77 million a day from the economy. But here's the detail that tells the real story. On Sunday afternoon, February 22nd, a taxi driver named Alexandro Ordonez left a family barbecue in Caima, a district of Arequipa, with his 15-year-old son, Alex. He told his family he was going to protect his house. To save time, they crossed through a torrentera, an ancient watercourse that has funneled floodwater through that neighborhood for centuries. A wall of mud activated without warning, and both were swept away. Their bodies were found the next morning in a ravine downstream. The neighborhood where they lived was built directly over a path that water has claimed for hundreds of years. And after the last El Niño Costero killed over 100 people in 2017. Peru created a $1 billion reconstruction authority and promised to build 98 flood prevention projects, so this would never happen again. Not one has been completed. The rain started quietly in December. By January 20th, Peru's civil defense agency, INDECI, had tallied 12 dead and 400 displaced across the northern coast. The NFN Commission, the official body for monitoring El Niño, shifted its alert to vigilance. By early February, 516 districts sat under emergency declarations, and the death toll had climbed past 59. Then came February 19th, and everything accelerated. Torrential rain slammed Arequipa province, activating the city's network of torrenteras, ancient channels carved into the landscape that sliced through neighborhoods built directly on top of them. The torrentera Chulo overflowed with enough force to flood the city's bus terminal and damage 16 of the province's 29 districts. An 85-year-old woman named Isidora Molina Ancasi was swept to her death in Upper Caima. A massive mudslide buried the Panamericana Sur Highway at Ocucaje, stranding hundreds of vehicles across a 20-kilometer stretch. 3 days later, on February 22nd, the second wave struck harder. Multiple torrenteras activated simultaneously. Lahars formed on the slopes of Volcan Misty, 17 kilometers from the city center. At the Flora Tristan housing complex, 130 ground floor apartments vanished under 1.5 meters of mud. And at 4:20 in the afternoon, a Peruvian Air Force Mi-17 helicopter lost contact during a flight from Pisco to Arequipa. Search teams found the wreckage the next morning, 7 kilometers east of Chala, in dense mountain fog. 15 dead. No survivors. Lieutenant General Gregorio Cesar Mendiola Lompard, the FAP operations commander, confirmed the loss. The sole living thing pulled from the wreckage was a small caramel-colored dog found beside its owner's body. But this is where the scope of this disaster expands beyond one city. Peru stretches 2,400 kilometers along the Pacific coast of South America. Start at the Ecuadorian border. Tumbes and Piura, the country's northernmost coastal regions, are being hammered by flooding. Drop south through Lambayeque, where the 2017 El Niño wiped out entire districts that were never rebuilt. Continue to Lima, the capital, where the Rimac River is surging with Andean runoff. Then keep going another 1,000 kilometers south to Arequipa, population 1.1 million, now submerged in mud. 14 of Peru's 25 regions are under emergency declarations. The Panamericana Sur, the country's critical north-south artery, is severed at multiple points. Here is the problem that is not making headlines. Peru's coast is supposed to be one of the driest places on Earth. The cold Humboldt Current flowing north from Antarctica keeps the air stable and the rainfall near zero in a normal year. That is what the cities were built for. El Niño Costero destroys that equation. It is not the same El Niño that dominates global weather headlines. Traditional El Niño warms the Central Pacific. El Niño Costero is a localized marine heat wave confined to the waters directly off Peru's coast, and it can develop even when the broader Pacific is cooling. That is exactly what is happening now. Sea surface temperatures at Talara Station reached 29 degrees Celsius on February 19th, more than 6 degrees above normal. That superheated water destabilizes the atmosphere and generates extreme rainfall over a landscape that evolved to receive almost none. But that was only half the collision. This wall of water is crashing into a country in political freefall. Peru has cycled through 8 presidents in a decade. On February 17th, Congress removed President Jose Jerry over corruption. His replacement, 83-year-old Jose Maria Balcazar, did not appoint a cabinet until February 24th. For 7 days, while people drowned and a helicopter fell from the sky, Peru had no government, no ministers, no legal authority to implement emergency decrees. Abraham Levy, the meteorologist known across Peru as the Hombre del Tiempo, warned bluntly that Peru will suffer from El Niño Costero, that the phenomenon is growing, and that it is growing fast. And this is where it gets worse. 5,500 homes damaged, 100 vehicle bridges wrecked, 29 destroyed completely. 152 schools damaged in Arequipa alone. Over 5,000 meters of retaining walls collapsed. 85,000 people affected nationwide. Those 7 worst-hit regions represent 23% of Peru's entire GDP and 27% of its formal workforce. Nearly 2 million people living in poverty inhabit the disaster zone. On the morning of February 20th, police officer Patrick Ospina Orihuela, 33 years old and a volunteer firefighter, arrived at Puente Rayito del Sol in central Lima after reports of a dog trapped on a small river island in the Rimac. He entered the water with a safety line, reached the islet, and released the rope to grab the animal. The dog jumped. Ospina reached for it and lost his footing. Witnesses saw him raise his hand near Puente Delanto before the current swallowed him. His body was recovered the next day at the river's mouth where the Rimac meets the Pacific. He received a posthumous promotion. A pet shelter was named in his honor. Then came the part that rewrites the timeline of this disaster. CENAMI, Peru's meteorological agency, confirmed on February 24th that El Niño Costero 2026 is officially active. Grinia Avalos Roldan, CENAMHI's Director of Meteorology, said the phenomenon will extend through at least November and could reach moderate intensity before July. March, historically Peru's wettest month, the month when the 2017 disaster reached its deadliest point, has not yet begun. The interim government running Peru right now exists for one purpose: to manage elections scheduled for April 12th. Whether it has the capacity or the will to mount a genuine emergency response is a question no one in Lima can answer. Victor Hugo Rivera Chavez, mayor of Arequipa province, captured it plainly after President Balcazar spent fewer than 10 minutes touring the damage. "Good intention is not enough," he said. "We need concrete, immediate action." Will the rebuilt cabinet act before the March rains arrive? Or will the same paralysis that delayed the emergency decree by a week repeat when the worst is still ahead? Will the failure to complete a single one of 98 promised flood prevention projects finally be investigated? Or will Peru's 9th president in a decade inherit the same broken system? And how many more families are living right now, tonight, in neighborhoods built over watercourses that have carried floodwater for centuries, waiting for protection that was promised 9 years ago and never came? Somewhere in Caime, the mud is still drying in the house that Alexandro Ordonez left a barbecue to protect. His wife and 2 young children are still there. The rain has paused. Sanamhai says it returns by March 5th.